Hey, what's going on, everybody? Joe Menza here, and I thought I'd take a little time out to just go over some of the materials first, something I don't always do. Okay, so first with the brushes. This is the main brush that I use, and this is the Pro Art Ron Ranson Hake. It's made out of goat hair, and it's tapered. The thing about this brush in comparison to a lot of other brushes is that it's trimmed on the edge so you can get a very straight edge when you're painting. It's not shaggy or fluffy, or at least it shouldn't be. The next brush is, and really you can limit it down to these two brushes. This is a rigger or liner type brush. It's number 3. And then finally you should just have this in your arsenal, and you should have a flat brush. This, I believe, is like a 1/2 inch. And so these 3 brushes are really all you need. And that's the key to the simplified nature of this type of painting, is to reduce the amount of fussiness that you do in your paintings so that you're not using tiny little brushes to try to achieve the most detail in a painting. You're doing a more impressionist painting and leaving a lot up to the viewer. So the next thing after that is you're going to need a palette. Now we use a plastic tray. These trays you can buy at like the hobby store. These are plastic. They call them butcher trays and whatnot. And this gives you the ability, let's look at this one. This one I just kind of use for mixing. So this gives you the ability to put your colors all the way around and mix in the center. You can use 2 trays, but this gives you the ability to be able to mix and to have the freedom to move around within your palette. Okay, so the colors that you start with here are the colors. This color palette was recommended by Ron Ranson to keep things simple. He was actually the father of using the Hake brush for fast and loose landscape paintings. We have a group based on his teaching over on Facebook. So if you're interested, you want to join, and this is something you want to do, then by all means do so. So we have here ultramarine blue, a yellow, which is usually a lemon yellow, Payne's gray, alizarin crimson, raw sienna, burnt umber, and light red. So those are the 7 colors. Now I have a couple others that I've added along the way, but this is designed for the beginner, to get the beginner started, and it really does work. To keeping it as simple as possible really does work. Now, if you're intimidated by this brush, I highly recommend you use the bigger one. They do have a medium-sized brush, so you can see the difference. So if you feel like you can wield a more narrow brush a lot easier, then by all means start with this. I do believe Ron Ranson used this size brush more frequently over the years than the larger brush, but I think if you get used to this brush, you can very easily go to this brush. Now finally, paper. My paper that I found that I like using is I use, this is Fabriano Studio Watercolor. It's 25% cotton. Now most of your beginner, some of them are all wood pulp, but 25% cotton still has enough of the, will give you enough of the watercolor effect that you see from some of the more expensive papers without the real expense. Now, will it react the same way as other watercolor papers? If you have something like Arches, this is 100% cotton. It's probably 3 times more than the Fabriano. But it will do things with watercolor that you wouldn't necessarily get in a 25% cotton paper. The way that the paint spreads and dissolves into the paper, those types of things you're going to see more with cotton paper. And cotton paper is great. It's what all the pros use. But if you're just starting out, I like a 25% cotton. I'll even use, there's another paper here. This is the Canson XL. And this is another one. I do believe it's 25%. I thought I saw that on here. But this paper reacts. It's very smooth. I like the Fabriano because it has a nice texture to it. But Canson XL is a good runner-up because it's just the way it works. I do like it. And there's other watercolor papers you can get out there. You can go with like an Arches. This is a rough paper. This one here has a lot of texture to it, a lot of texture. And it's fun to use, but it's a whole different animal all on its own. So, should we do some painting? Okay, let's do a quick, simple painting. And I'm trying to stick to more of the beginner stuff because I think I can be of help in that area. So let's get to it. All right, so back now. Let's do a quick painting. I have one on my board that I did just yesterday. And you can tell it's a pretty simple scene. We have the background and we have, some elements in the foreground, little water pond type scene. And one thing I didn't show in the beginning was I use this water jug. You can use any container for water. What's nice about this though is the way when you make the water come off the hake, this little plastic lip here is just sharp enough that enough water comes off so that you don't have dripping water off your brush. And that's what I like about it. These little pots you can get relatively cheaply. And then also what you should have by your side is you should also have a towel of some type so that you can dab off excess water. This is a great thing to have. Ron Ranson called it a break. And it really is a good thing to have so that you can dab off your water. Okay, so let's get into it. So we're going to do something like this, but the reason why I have this up here is in my other video where I was doing sort of a beginner type thing and step by step didn't really focus on the idea of like horizon, foreground, background, sky type thing. So whenever you do this, you should think about where your main area is going to fall. So, and that would be your horizon line. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to get technical to where you scare anyone off. But you can take a ruler and you can do this. Say you decide, okay, I'm going to have a large portion of my sky here and I'm going to have my foreground down here. So maybe we're going to have it just come halfway down. You can draw this with a ruler, make it very, very straight, and say, okay, this is where I'm going to fall. This is going to be my sky area. So if you wanted to draw this out and that's easier for you, then I say to do that. So let's say you were going to have some mountains here. The mountains is my favorite thing to do. And you're going to have some water coming here. You can draw out how you're going to have that. I don't draw a lot of things. Let's say you wanted to have a tree here. Keep it really super simple. This is a Colinar lead pencil. It's a nice thing to have. And say so you wanted to have a tree here. Okay, so you can have a tree here. Whatever it is that you're going to have over here, you can draw this out and just have it so basic so that it just helps you as a guide. If it helps you, I don't really like drawing it first unless I'm doing a city scene. So let's go ahead and do that now. Let's grab our palette. And again, the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to wet the paper. Now, some people advocate wetting the paper just in the sky and then not wetting the bottom at all. And then you can do more dry techniques. I've just become more of a fan of just wetting the whole paper down because you can always let the bottom dry if you want to do some things. So I wet the whole paper down. I don't even believe Ron Ranson wet the entire sheet down, but it's just easier to get that done. So let's just do that. Wet the whole paper down. Okay, and then we're going to go in and we're going to use raw sienna. Raw sienna is the binder of it all. It warms up the background. Very, very light. And if you want it heavier in places, you can leave little areas of white. But this is going to be something that's sort of like the background. It combines the colors nicely together. It acts as, Ron Ranson would say, a lubricant to the other colors. Okay, so we've got that down. We're going to wash our brush, and we're going to dip into now the ultramarine blue. Now don't do what I did here. You can see my palette's getting a little out of hand. I'm going to actually redo my palette. My yellow is like right next to my blue. I don't know how that happened, but it happened. So I'm going to get a little blue on my brush, and I'm going to use a little, you can use Payne's Gray. I'm using a little neutral tint. For some reason I don't have any Payne's Gray on my palette. And I'm just going to put in a nice basic blue sky in the background. And we'll leave a little area open for light there, just for some drama. And now, while we have this on the brush, remember, water is going to sort of reflect the sky. So let's just get some of that same sky color into where the water is going to be, and it'll create a nice little glow. So there we have it, just the basic essentials. We've laid the foundation for what we're actually going to paint on top. Some people call this a wash, and you're basically washing the paper. You're staining the paper. You're staining it, and what you're going to do is once this dries, then you're going to start putting your other layers on top. Very simple. And if you don't have the time, you can pull out the hair dryer and give it a quick hair dry. All right. So now what we're going to do is, we've done the sky, we've done the watery foreground, we still got our horizon line and where our mountains are going to be. So let's take a little bit of burnt umber and some ultramarine blue. We're going to mix those together. I don't have ratios. I know some people are like, is it 20% of, you know, no, you know, I've been doing this for now a certain amount of time, and I just kind of do it. You know, they say you should spend more time mixing your paint than painting. So it's something you're going to have to do as you go along. So let's go ahead and we're going to put in our mountain peak. Leave one peak the highest. Equal peaks is kind of like redundant. So there is our mountain. We did that very, very quickly. And because I didn't totally mix it on my brush, I've got some varying colors there, and it's really nice and it's pleasant that way. So now we're going to take, and I'm just going to wash the brush a little bit, not too completely. You don't want to wash the brush after every color. You do not want to do that. That was a mistake I was making in the beginning. So we're going to take some yellow and a little bit of blue, and we're going to make a sort of a greenish color with a little bit of neutral tint. And we're going to start laying in, our, let's get some more brightness going here. Hope that helps. There we go. So we're going to start laying in some of this ground, and these are just sweeps, okay? Sweeps with the brush across. Get a little more yellow on the brush, vary it up. You'll see as you go, vary it up. And then we're going to come in from this side because we want this sort of stream running down from the top. And so we have that little water, we have our stream on the side. And again, you can vary it up, go in with your raw sienna. The raw sienna, the greens, all of these earth colors really are what make it look realistic. Some people like to use really bright colors, and that's great. I like to use colors that you'd find more in nature. So if my paintings look a little more bland, I mean, that's probably the wrong word to use. It's because I'm trying to look more authentic to like what you might find in nature as opposed to just super bright colors. But some people really like colors, so do what you like. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to accent with some darker color, just mixing in a little neutral tint, burnt umber, a little ultramarine blue, and I'm just sort of accenting with the edge of the hake. I'm accenting the shoreline here. And that just makes it look like it's defined. Now, if you remember, we talked about having a tree over here. It's hard to see my pencil lines now at this point. But again, with the burnt umber, ultramarine, again, we're always sticking with these same colors. So it makes everything look a little bit more uniform as well. So let's go ahead and we're going to put in this tree here. You know, pick your shape. You're going to pick a letter, the letter Y. Start with that. Pick a letter. And that letter should be your starting point for your trees, if that helps you. And then once you have the basic shape in for your tree, you can come in and you can drop in. You can take that rigger brush, and now you can start putting in your branches. The branches is going to take a little bit more finesse because you're doing, this is probably the most fussy work that you'll do, is just doing these little branches. And don't feel like you got to put them all in. Only put a few in, enough to suggest to the viewer that that's a tree. That's it. That's really all you need. If you put some leaves in and you come back later and you say, well, it needs a few more, that's fine. Come back later and do that. Now, what I like to do is I like to put a little bit of grass underneath the tree so it doesn't look like it's floating in midair. So I like to pop that in there. Now what we're doing here, this is called wet into wet, by the way. So you're mostly doing things wet. There's wet into dry, wet into wet. But most of what you're doing is wet into wet. And if that poses problems for you, sometimes you have to dry certain things. Then you have to break out the hairdryer or go have a cup of coffee and come back, and when you come back it should be dry and you can do some other things. So that's okay. Now you say, well, you know, this side over here I drew it out. Now that I've painted it, I don't know, it's just not you know, there's something missing, and I have a tendency to just like throw in trees and stuff. Let's put in a nice big guy right here. So we're just going to throw in a nice big one, some burnt umber, ultramarine blue. Put a little bit of grass on the bottom. And voila, we have another tree, but a closer one because it's bigger, it's darker. And let's throw in a few more. With the rigger brush, a few more branches. Take your time with this. I don't want to take up so much time in the video. So if I skip over anything. It takes a while to get everything. You got to have everything in place. You know, your tree, your mountain, you know, all of these elements, they finally come together for you and you'll feel some real satisfaction. Don't be too hard on yourself. If you watch my other video, I did a winter scene. I was actually pretty pedantic with that. And like, you know, it's just a phase that you go through, that you're constantly going through as an artist. And you're always sort of down on, you know, you got to enjoy the victories as you go and say, wow, that really looks good. And look at the things that you like about the painting. And don't always be so harsh on yourself because it's art. To me, it's sort of fatalistic. This is what was meant to be. When you go into a painting, just think to yourself, you know, I'm doing art here. I'm doing a time-honored tradition, goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's been passed down to us. Each little thing we learn isn't necessarily anything we invented. It's something we learned from the previous person. So let that just play in as you're doing this and enjoy what you're doing. Play the radio, play some music, and just enjoy paint on the paper. That's all. All right. So if you want at this point, some people like bare trees. Up to you what you like. You can use this as a chance to get in some fall colors. Really up to you. I'm going to dab in, I'm going to do the stippling effect where I'm going to dab into some yellow. And I'm going to just get some leaves on these trees. I like leafy trees. The bare trees do look neat if you're doing a winter scene. But really that's it. You don't have to go crazy with these leaves, and don't cover up all your background. Okay, and then while you have that on your brush, you can add a little bit more grass to the bottom. And again, you see how this blue and yellow worked in here to reflect our sky because we did that ahead of time. So it's something to think about if you know you're going to have water in your painting. It's something to think about beforehand, because you can really use that to your advantage. So that's it. We have a really nice little scene here. This here, we'll let it dry and we'll zoom in, but this can be framed, put in your favorite room of your house, and that's it. Don't think it has to be perfect. It's the enjoyment that comes along with it. It's a learning experience. There's a lot in this one painting. There's more here than just me hitting the brush. There's years of figuring this process out, and don't fuss over the mistakes. The mistakes may end up being the best part of your painting. So just let it happen. And don't be afraid to go in there and just throw paint around on the paper. And that's it. I hope you found this useful and you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a comment. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And I will zoom in here. You can also visit my eBay shop. I got a little eBay shop. I found it helps to sort of offset the cost of a lot of these materials to sell paintings. I've sold a number of them on there already, and I've gotten a lot of really good feedback. So if you like my work and you want to see it hanging somewhere in your house, check out my eBay shop. There's a link in my header of the YouTube channel. Thanks again, everybody. All right, so here is the finished painting. Now, another thing you can add to your supply list is, if you don't have one of these already, you can get one of these mats. You can get it from the hobby store, or you can order some of these online. Just really helps with the finished painting, so you can get an idea of your little window to the world you just created. And let's zoom in very closely, and we can see what we were able to do. Again, see, you can see these little branches peeking through. Again, this texture of the paper, which is something I like from this particular one, this Fabriano. Little light coming through, and see, this is what I love about watercolors, is although I didn't really plan this, it has a nice effect, and you can see how keeping multiple colors on the brush have just created some tones here, things that weren't necessarily planned. It's always a surprise with every painting. Again, with our water here and our little shores, just some things that happened with the ground here and how this all blends together. And I really like, this is why I like the watercolor medium, and I hope you do too. And that's one of my things, is just to, I found this late in life, and so for people to find it sooner would be great. I wish I had. It's just so enjoyable and so relaxing. So again, I thank you for watching. Please subscribe and comment. Everyone, make yourself a great day.